and decide when to use them. So maybe it was a little bit of a surprise that in those situations where Magnus potentially had the big advantage, he actually played quite quickly.
It's also the feeling, right? You want to play on your opponent's clock. You don't want to give them those extra seconds to be able to think. So you rush through and you miss that one window of opportunity that you had. But as David says, Magnus doesn't usually do that. It's perhaps the storyline. And Magnus just takes a little bit of time to warm up. You know, if you have to strike against him, you need to do it in the first half of this match. Once Magnus finds his rhythm, once he finds the liquid flow, that's going to be tough.
Nice, nice there, Tanya. And yeah, Magnus, he himself would describe that missed opportunity as sloppy. He is his own harshest critic, Magnus Carlsen. He knows that was a missed opportunity, but he's also a master at resetting. And here we see a slightly offbeat d4 opening as Black sets up with a Fianchetto, now trying to strike at the white center. I guess we would call this a TORRE attack, with White's Dark Squared Bishop coming out with an early pin. But yeah, Nihal Sarin, he is known to surprise his opponents early, play these offbeat lines and hope to absorb pressure and use his clock skills later. I'm going to say that Magnus, maybe it's just match strategy beforehand. He knows the clock is Nihal's biggest weapon. Maybe in his mind, he's like, just blitz, keep that 3-minute buffer.
It's also a little bit of a test as well, right? I think it not difficult to see that a lot of people say Nihal's speed is his greatest asset. So in game number 1, it makes sense for Magnus to be probing, to be testing, to see how quickly can you actually move, can you keep up with the speed that I've got in the tank. And psychologically, maybe that's advantage Magnus for the match, because Nihal's now realizing, okay, I can move really quickly when I need to. I showed that at the end of that last game. That was fantastic. But I need to get into better positions over the board before that becomes necessary.
And although he allowed that kind of accidental repetition at the end there, Magnus, do you think, Tanya, he would have been able to flag Nihal Sarin with just rook and pawn versus rook and pawn? Nihal had just over 30 seconds. Do you think it would have been possible for Magnus if he'd been a bit quicker, a bit wilier on the clock?
You know, who knows? It's a really tough call because there's also the 50-move rule. At some point, there would have had to be a trade. But 28 seconds, I mean, to survive that, Nihal would really have to be on his A game. Hard to predict, but if I had to, you know what? I'm going to say Nihal would have survived it.
And he did survive in his own way in the end. As we see this position, not too much has changed, just one set of pawn trades. Black is camped out on his first 3 ranks. And very, very solid. Hard for White to step forward. No pawn breaks imminent for either side. It's a maneuvering battle.
And you know, who knows? We might be in a similar situation at some point in this match. It's just getting started. We're just in game 2. It's a best of 4. We might have some more of those crazy scrambles.
Bring them on.
And we do have to ask the question as well. Who do the crazy scrambles favor? Before the start of the match, we were thinking Magnus Carlsen, accuracy over the board. Nihal Sarin, when the time trouble starts, extremely quick. We've been given pause for thought. I wonder if it's nerves or something similar, where Nihal Sarin allowed Magnus Carlsen to get up to 2 minutes extra on the clock. And this was in the middle game, long before the time scrambles took place. So if he's able to manage that and then bring Carlsen into an end game where it's actually Magnus who's being pressured on the clock, that would be really interesting to watch.
Time scrambles, I would say, David, favor Nihal Sarin, as long as the clocks are close, as long as it's a tight battle.
Sure,
you know, not Magnus running away with 2.5 minutes and Nihal playing with a minute on the clock.
Sure.
Also depends on the kind of position. But if it becomes sort of a level position and both players under 1 minute, it's anyone's game. I'd even give Nihal as a favorite in that one.
Agreed. If it's a level middle game, 30 seconds versus 30 seconds, I think Nihal really fancies his chances. But Magnus will try not to let that happen. A quick start to this game from Nihal Sarin. That's a good thing. These system types of openings, like the TORRE attack, you put your bishop on the same square every time, put your pawns on the same square, develop your other minor pieces to logical posts. This lends itself to speed. You can pretty much pre-move your first 17 turns, as Nihal has done here. It's cost him a little bit of time, just over 1.5 minutes, but ultimately, you have no weaknesses. Very difficult for the opponent to find a plan. You bide your time for later.
And I've seen Nihal do these openings, these unorthodox, slightly offbeat lines, so often in speed chess. And the reasons that you explain, it's exactly that, right? You need to know the plans. You need to know where to put the pieces. It's not as much about direct lines here.
Sure.
So you can get those first few moves in super quickly and then just ask your opponent, do you know how to proceed in this position with black, especially when you're slightly cagey? Not a single pawn for Magnus beyond the third rank.
Well, let's spend a couple of moments talking about that right now. If we could pick a couple of pieces for their positions to improve, where do we want to be?
Repetition? Is this the moment?
Already?
Magnus is offering a silent draw here. If the white knight goes back where it came from to attack the black d6 pawn, the black queen would then likely move. And Nihal says no, that would have been the third time they'd reached that position. It would have been a draw. Nihal, brave move playing on.
So gutsy by Nihal, you know, in a level position. Even the clock time similar. Nihal says, I want a game. Because when you're playing against Magnus Carlsen, you have the white pieces. You need to make the most of every single opportunity. Maximize the chance of playing white. And Nihal knows he's got the space advantage. He knows he's got those extra seconds on the clock. It's game on. A bold decision, Magnus amused.
Magnus smiling there. He's like, please respect me in future, kid. But I think Magnus enjoys being challenged. He loves seeing these young players take him on head first.
It's maybe Magnus was aiming for psychological torture, but I feel like Nihal Sarin has gone, no, absolutely no way. I want to take the bull by the horns here. Absolutely love to see it. So now, in this position, where do we want the pieces to be on the board? Let's talk about key themes and ideas for white and black. What are we looking to accomplish, say, 5 to 10 moves from now?
Yeah, the white pieces need to improve. I think for black, it's clearer to see which pieces aren't well placed. I'm going to point out the black queen, stuck in the back rank, not looking great. The black rook in the corner, therefore a bit hemmed in. The white knights look like they have a lot of potential. First, the white bishop is going round, maybe to the b3 square. The white knight's coming forward. Watch out, the black queen in the meantime, making a bit of a battery. No threat yet. The g2 square is defended by the white knight. But ultimately, it is about jockeying for position right now. To my eyes, it looks maybe easier to play with black, but white, great centralization so far.
And he makes another bishop retreating move right now, and Magnus continues to improve the position of his pieces. You know, when you've maximized the placement of your pieces, then you start thinking about pawn breaks. For Magnus, one of them does exist. It's a thematic idea in such structures to push the b pawn. b5 is something that's always in the air to try to gain some squares, to try to liquidate, sort of a minority attack, a 2 versus 3 on the left flank. Sure. You try to target it with that b pawn.
So it's, look, easier to see black's position improving here. And you can see with the bishop to g7, black's pieces compared to a few moves ago already looking like the pieces are a little bit more coordinated. Where do white's pieces want to be? Like, what's Nihal aiming for here?
Well, he's doing the same, right? Get the rook to those central lines. He's also inviting Magnus to potentially push the e-pawn forward, hitting the knight, which would allow the knight to a beautiful spot on d4, attacking the black queen as well.
Okay.
So trying to provoke that to happen. The knight and the bishop eyeing the e5 pawn, sort of paralyze Magnus's knight and rook to defend that pawn as well. The white bishop on b3 will be nicely lined up on a beautiful diagonal, eyeing that tender spot of f7. I think he's done this well. You know, he can think about doubling up on the D line. Again, it looks like the kind of position that's easier to improve for white than for Magnus.
Yeah, and it's a low responsibility type of position for white. You're not really risking too much, at least not yet. You're saying to black, yes, your pawn in the center, that black e-pawn, that's the key to the position. That's vulnerable for now. A lot of my pieces are lined up against it. You don't really want to move it forward. That white bishop looking good too. So it's kind of that type of position where you're just waiting, saying, it's your responsibility to do something here, Magnus, and that's going to cost you time on the clock.
You know, one of the hardest things for me when I used to play would be that when I've declined a repetition from my opponent, that would just play at the back of my mind. And here, you know, at a completely different level and a different stage, Nihal Sarin declined a repetition by Magnus just a few moves ago. How easy is it for a player to forget about that and just focus rather than thinking, what, should I have just pulled the brakes, bailed out, you know, gotten closer to the Armageddon?
Yeah, I think in a long game, you would have more time for this to just clutter your mind and for that thought to go round and round, but luckily you don't have too much time on the clock. I think the players will just be calculating here. Nihal spending a few seconds now to come up with a plan.
Also, to be fair, when declining the repetition, we got more of an emotional reaction from Magnus than we did from Nihal. I think it strengthened his determination, it galvanized his will a little bit, whereas Magnus was thinking, oh, okay, excellent. This kid's not to be intimidated.
Yeah.
Great. Now let's do the job over the board.
And that's been the fascinating part about this younger generation, right? That they just don't let Magnus Carlsen's name get to their head. They have immense respect for Magnus. They've grown up idolizing him, but they all say, when you face him on the board, you need to forget his name.
You need to, otherwise he'll be world #1 for the next 40 years. You absolutely have to. That's, I think playing without fear is the traditional mentality of a challenger to the throne. And if you imagine what's potentially at stake, Nihal Sarin is only looking at what's on the board. But if you think about it this way, a match win against Magnus Carlsen at the Esports World Cup, that is an incredible feather to have in your cap. And he does have the opportunity to do that right now.
That would be by far the highlight of his career, Nihal, and also by far the longest think of the game from him. But long think, wrong think. He's traded off a set of pieces. But look at this. The white knight now kicked to a bad square. The knight has no central squares to jump to. You cannot block the d-file because the white rook needed to defend its bishop. But now we see a trade. That white knight sidelined, looking horrible, almost trapped. That was a horrible decision from Nihal Sarin. He was overthinking it.
And he took about 2 minutes, like you said, to make that move and played the worst one of the game so far. Magnus now, all his pieces, slowly and surely coming forward, now challenging the D line as well. That knight's headed to the D3 square. Knight D3, block the connection between the two rooks, win the open line.
He was so patient for so long, Nihal Sarin. He was playing so well for so long. He just needed to sit, wait, and ask Magnus what you're doing. Instead, he gave Magnus this clear path forward, this clear plan, and look at the Black Knight jumping.
Wow.
Rook trade offered, but you cannot get greedy here with white. Let's show what might happen if the rooks get traded, and if the white queen tries to grab a pawn in the center now, we would see the game end abruptly after the queen swoops in, the white king sliding into the corner, and now the black queen can move pretty much anywhere. And the knight check on f2 is going to be deadly. A royal fork hitting the white king in the corner, the white queen, white rook. This would be game over, since the white rook cannot take the knight due to a check on the back rank. We're actually headed in this direction. Nihal Sarin cannot allow the black queen in to his position.
Oof, tactics now, and you're down on the clock and you sort of walked into it. And that's a frustrating thought for Nihal Sarin right now. You know, again, the flashbacks of a declined draw offer and then taking this long thing and landing yourself up in this position. He's on the defense. It's still far from over, but one thing's for sure. You compare Black's knight to the white knight,
Exactly.
Black knight, the winner. The bishop on g7, eyeing those two pawns whenever b4 happens and there's a weakness created. Stronger than the white bishop. The black rook more active. The black queen, super strong, eyeing that f2 spot. And b4 on the board immediately.
This is the danger, right? Magnus didn't just see the weakness, but he executed it so quickly. Nihal Sarin actually did a great job, credit to him, in the first half of this game so far, managing his time, but that long think into what might be the game-changing move, maybe even the game-ending move, really cost him so much. Magnus is turning the screw. All of these follow-up moves by Magnus Carlsen, they're happening near instantaneously.
And there we see a quick pawn trade. Magnus at least now has to take a time out to defend his central pawn. There we go. Nihal has set up a nice defense. The white bishop holds some important pawns. The white knight nearby, now retreating. Magnus is going to go a pawn up. That white c-pawn is doomed. Short term, long term, there we go. It does drop immediately, but it's all pawns on one side of the board. None of those pawns are passed. Nihal still has some defensive chances, but the clock is the main concern.
Magnus has famously in the past said he does not believe in fortresses. Can Nihal Sarin prove him wrong? Can he set up a fortress down upon in this position?
Big question. I think that's the key question. It's going to be so tough. He needs some simplifications here. He needs queens off the board. We need knights, rooks, something off the board to make it easier to pre-move. The reason he was able to hold the previous game with 28 seconds on his clock, it was just rooks and pawns.
Yep.
But the complication here, the complexity of this whole army still remaining, not going to be easy.
I think that no matter which side of the argument you're on whether fortresses can exist or not, I think they can be broken down if you don't have enough time to consider the perfect move in response to every attacking move. And we're getting to 4 minutes versus 2 minutes. There's an argument to say Nihal Sarin needs a fortress, but unfortunately, I think the clock's going to end up being the key to barreling down the front door, even if one exists.
Yeah, and look at Magnus, his last move, given an exclamation mark, it's such an innocuous looking move, but Magnus just keeps the tension, and there the white queen gives way. Now the black bishop no longer pinned, expecting that one to move, and again, it cost Nihal there 34 seconds. He doesn't have too much time left, 34 seconds to play what is a mistake.
And with piece formation that Magnus has, the knight, the bishop, the queen, so much into Nihal's camp, you know, that extra pawn, Nihal will have to burn time on every single move. And that's the problem in this position. There are no easy moves. There are no fast moves for white.
I think Magnus is using his time here to basically work out which of these options will either force Nihal into at least a 30-second think or force him to make a mistake almost immediately. The bishop goes back. Bishop e5 now played on the board.
Inviting some trades there of the minor pieces. If white was to capture the knight, Magnus intends on capturing the bishop and get that stronghold on the d3 square. Put a strong passer. Get your pawn moving forward. Magnus putting immense pressure on Nihal's knight.
Great time usage there from Magnus Carlsen. Yes, he invested around 40 seconds, but he slowed Nihal down. For every 40 seconds Magnus has, Nihal has to play a lot quicker. Wow, he just waits with his king. There are some pins. The black knight cannot move. Since the black queen would be vulnerable, so just maintaining the position. But again, Nihal spending 30 seconds. Magnus needs to keep trying to create those long thinks from his opponent. Nihal needs to speed up meanwhile.
Well, now it's a big threat. Knight takes knight, attacking the white queen is threatened as Magnus unpins his own queen in the position, again forcing Nihal to come up with a defensive strategy. And you know, you can find those defenses once, twice, but can you do it 10 times against the world number one?
And that's exactly the kind of thing that Magnus is so good at doing. Ask a question? Cool, great. Glad you found the answer. I'm going to ask you 20 more. And the moment you get one of those answers wrong is the moment I pounce and take the game from you. Nihal Sarin now under 1 minute on the clock. Magnus Carlsen aiming to turn the screw.
Well, big decision. He gives up his rook for a knight. There is some tension along the e-file. So if Magnus wants to take that rook back with his pawn, he has to calculate well. It's very tempting. That pawn is so close to landing as a promotion, as a new queen. But Magnus, he's calculating here. He takes with the rook instead, taking with the pawn, according to the computer, was winning. Now, again, it's a a rook for knight advantage for Magnus, but still some work to do.
It is a winning advantage in exchange up for Magnus, but again, the question, can Nihal Sarin set up a fortress as his clock goes red? He's playing on the dark squares, trying to set up that battery. The bishop lands on that central square. e5 is the big idea, threatening checkmates to Magnus Carlsen's king. How is Magnus stopping bishop e5?
Ooh, he offers a queen trade, Magnus Carlsen. If the queens do come off, the game will go on a lot longer, but only black can win. I think that is objectively a winning position too. Nihal deciding there's no other way. The white king otherwise would have been caught in the mating net. And here we're going to see the technical phase with the black king trying to get into the battle.
This is tense. This feels like a repeat of game one. Magnus Carlsen winning. Nihal Sarin, 39 seconds on the clock, needs a miracle to save this one. It happened in game one. Will it happen again?
The grind is beginning. Magnus could make this last another 30 moves, but he's just looking for that one additional critical mistake. It feels like we've got a lot of nails in the coffin. We now need the final one.
The black king is coming. The black king is making its way slowly towards the white pawn on f3. You need to put your pieces on light squares. When you're playing against a bishop in an endgame like this, when it comes down to time flagging, keep your pieces on the opposite color complex. But look at this. Nihal's trying to set up a blockade on the dark squares so the black king cannot pass. But it's a matter of time. White is running out of moves. The black pieces are almost optimized. Black is threatening to win the white pawn on h4, and now the black king can cross over. It's coming. It's winning for Magnus Carlsen.
And there he blocks that bishop diagonal. The black king about to move forward. Magnus about to win this game as the king gets closer to that white pawn. Nihal Sarin is going to resign. Don't take that bishop. That would have been a stalemate.
And there we go. Magnus Carlsen wins by resignation. A small joke there, a stalemate trap, but Magnus dodges it, takes the win.
And Magnus Carlsen, the world number one, asking questions of Nihal Sarin here, saying, "You're quick with no time on the clock, but are you quick enough?" to find the thread that you have to push through that needle over the board. On this occasion, he was found wanting, and Magnus Carlsen goes 1.5 to a half up in this quarterfinal.